Welcome back to the Practical Church Podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Dotson, and today on the podcast, I'm going to share with you 6 ways to sustain yourself in ministry, how to avoid burnout, and also how not to be cynical while you're doing ministry as well. Now, as always, this episode is brought to you in partnership with Mission Support. Mission Support knows you want to be effective in ministry, but if you're like most pastors and many ministry leaders, you probably feel like you never have enough time, energy, or expertise to get everything done. And so Mission Support comes alongside pastors just like you as a guide to provide the expertise to do the things you don't know how to do and give you back the time you desperately need. And so again, whether it's things like bookkeeping, SEO, payroll, websites, or any of their other services, you can talk to a guide today at missionsupport.com and go from feeling scattered to focus on your mission. It's possible to love being a pastor again. And of course, if you want to sign up for the Practical Church newsletter and get more resources, you can head to missionsupport.com/practical. All right, well, 6 ways to sustain yourself in ministry, how to be healthy in ministry, how to avoid burnout, and maybe one of my particular favorites, not to be cynical and not to be negative or like ministry is the worst. Yes, there's hard things about it, but honestly, it's an absolute privilege and joy to get to do the things that we get to do. And so how can we stay in that mindset to serve God's people well? So we got 6 ways to do it. Here's the first one, a consistent time with Jesus. Now, I know this is like you're a pastor, you're supposed to say that, but I want to talk about this for a minute. There's not a hard and fast rule. I mean, I was at a conference one time and I heard a respected pastor that was asked this question, like, for example, does sermon prep count as like quiet time or time with the Lord? And I thought his answer is really wise. He said that everyone should work out their own salvation with fear and trembling. In other words, there are certain seasons, there are certain times, and I don't think it's wise to necessarily say like, consistent time with Jesus looks like this for everyone. I will say, after 7 years of New City, talking to a lot of church planters in the Raleigh area through Acts 29, the network we're a part of, and various other places, I have kind of developed a thing that I've noticed, that those who prioritize time with Jesus outside of sermon prep or study of any kind do seem to be more in love with Jesus and also be just like in a better space mentally. And so again, I'm not saying like sermon prep doesn't count or studying doesn't count, but I'm just saying, man, if you want to sustain yourself in ministry, it is a consistent time with Jesus that does not require or you're not doing it for any external purpose, to have an answer, to write a sermon, to write a Bible study guide, or whatever it is. What does it look like for you to be consistent? My guess is, if you're listening to this or watching this on our YouTube channel, if you think of the times, seasons in your ministry when you probably felt the best or the freshest, it might not be so much contingent on what was going on in ministry as it is rather how you were doing with Jesus yourself. Were you having practical rhythms, or were you allowing the busyness of ministry to take away from that? So I know that is like the church answer, the pastor answer, but I would encourage you, man, the strongest way possible to have some consistent rhythms and practices with the Lord that do not require or do not stem from studying of any kind or sermon prepping of any kind. That stuff is great, but it's not really to refresh your soul. Yes, it can be refreshing to do it, but that's also for honest work. And so you and I, just like the people in our congregations, man, need some time that's devotional and pursuing Jesus just for the sake of it. And so again, whether it's, some quiet times, whatever you want to call that, times of fasting, maybe corporately meeting with guys or girls and talking about how things are going on in your life, consistent, regular time with Jesus. What's interesting is I've read this a couple of times. It was actually in a book I just read this past week, and it was talking about those who spend time like reading their Bible daily, the daily Bible reading. And they found, and I don't know, I think if you Google this, you can find it, because I've read this in a couple of books now. The most recent one was in De-Sizing the Church by Carl Vetters. It came out this past April. It was really, really helpful. It's called De-Sizing the Church. And so he references this. He talks about how there's actually no statistical difference that people can really tell between people who never read their Bible once, 2 times, or 3 times a week in terms of their daily practices and their habits. When you get to 4 times a week, that seems to be the tipping point where things actually change in your life. And I think part of that is because when you 3 times or less, it's not even every other day. It's less than half the week. If you do something at least 4 times a week, whether it's, again, time with Jesus, exercising, whatever habit you might want to build, you are now doing it more often than not. And you're also less likely to rely on willpower to do it, as opposed to this is a habit or discipline that I take. And so, I think that's a really good discipline for pastors, is to have at least 4 times a week outside of sermon prep or study or whatever that might be, where you are spending time with the Lord. If you don't want to be cynical and you don't want to burn out, you and I have to do things that are cultivating our love for Jesus, and that's important. So again, consistent time with Jesus, I would recommend outside of any study, any work, just to grow with Him. Now, here's number 2, and really number 2 through number 6 are some practical things that might sound self-serving, but if you want to sustain for the long haul, you and I have to have rhythms and practices in our life that keep us healthy. We have to do this. We cannot be all things to all people. In fact, all of us know this. For example, if I said, hey, you shouldn't take meetings or phone calls at 3 a.m., like you should block that off for sleep, we'd all be okay with it. And so I just want to say, we all have boundaries that we think are wise to follow. And so I'm just saying you need to be very clear on those boundaries instead of reactionary. So with that in mind, here we go. Here's number 2. I would highly encourage you to have specific times that you'll meet with people. Specific times that you'll meet with people. And that's when you meet with people. And then the times that you don't meet with people, you're doing other things, sermon prep, church work, whatever it might be. Again, of course, there's exceptions, but those are exceptions. Exceptions means they don't happen every week or even every other week. Like they might happen maybe once or twice a month or not at all. And so here's what where this is coming from. A couple weeks ago, I was talking to a pastor, and he mentioned how he had 9 meetings previously, or during the other day. Not 9 meetings during the week, but 9 meetings in one day. And this is not like including like staff meeting or like Bible study. It's like he had like 9 one-on-one meetings. That's what he did all day. And I looked at him and I was like, man, that's not smart. Because that's not like he has like one day booked for meetings. He had 9 meetings for one day, then he had other stuff, then he had meetings throughout the week. I'm not telling you what your average should be. I think 9 one-on-one meetings a week outside of, again, Bible studies, staff meetings, all that sort of thing is a lot. For I think the typical lead pastor, which he was, I think that's a lot. And so here's my encouragement. You will not survive if your calendar is full with reactionary meetings. My encouragement, again, if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, this point might not necessarily be new to you. And I'm not saying you gotta do it my way, but like for me, I have certain times on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday where I have a calendar. I recommend Calendly, but there's lots of apps out there where it syncs to my calendar and it is available unless I have something else in that spot. My mornings are not available. So it depends on what it is. Again, you have to do what's different for you. Depending on the day, it's either 10:30 or 11, or on Wednesdays when I do my sermon prep, it's like 12 noon or later. I don't take morning meetings. For me, and we'll get to this a little bit later on, is because that's where I can focus most, do creative things, sermon prep, study, do things like this, where I know I'm at my best and do these things that take maybe a little bit more brain power and energy than reading a book or having a conversation. So I was just saying, have specific times. Whatever that is for you, you should say, here's when I meet with people and here's where I don't. And you don't need to apologize for it. I would also say this, I know especially the size of your church, it might feel a little weird. And so I always want to encourage guys to try this, and then you'll find that like people are okay with it. I use something like Calendly. Anytime somebody wants to meet, whether they initiate it with me or I initiate it with them, I send them my Calendly. And I used to say, hey, if a time doesn't work out, let me know. Hardly any time has anyone ever said like, hey, these times don't work out, can we do something out? Now I just send my calendar, and I don't even say if there's not an available time, let me know, we can find something else out, because people know intuitively they can do it. I mean, I don't know the numbers. Easily over 95% of people will pick a time on my calendar because these are the times I'm available. It's kind of like, maybe this is helpful, it's kind of like if you go to the dentist or the doctor, like you can't just like show up whenever you want. You set an appointment during your workday and you go. Again, there are exceptions. I'm not saying this is a hard and fast rule for everybody, but maybe a baby step for you, for people that are asking to meet with you, you can do that. That you should not be meeting with people every single night, especially, seasons of life. If you're married, if you have kids, that one of my goals in life is for my kids, they may not articulate this, but I want them to, like, if somebody were to ask them, I want them to be able to say this, that when they're 18 years old, they will be able to say that they always knew their dad loved them more than he loved the church. Part of that is, here's when I do work, here's when I do ministry, and here's what I don't. It's not to say I never do work at nights. Sometimes I do, sometimes I have meetings, but they are exceptions, or they specifically planned, they are not reactionary. So I just want to say, man, find times in your week, here are the times that I meet with people, and here are the times that I don't. That will help you kind of make guardrails. For me as well, I use Calendly, and so another kind of advanced feature is you can like set how many meetings you're allowed to have per day. I'm not saying you got to do it this way. This is just how I've done it. For me, I actually max that out at 2. So let's say I have a Thursday and there's, many hours I'm available to meet on a Thursday. I haven't filled it in, the rest of that workday yet. And so if somebody if 2 meetings are already scheduled on Calendly on a Thursday, even if I have still time in my calendar for other meetings, it will say it's no longer available. Because I just know for me, bandwidth wise, going from person to person, it can be a lot, and it can be hard to get a lot of things done. And so all that to say, have specific times to meet with people. You don't need to explain it. You don't need to apologize for it. Just say, here's when I'm available. Pick a time that works for you. And of course, if it doesn't, you can find something else to meet or to work. That will help sustain you. Again, if you're reactionary with your time, if you're meeting with 9 people a day, multiple days a week, you're not going to get anything done, and you will feel stressed out. This same person has also admitted to me that they have been working Fridays and Saturdays consistently, and I think has only taken 1 full Saturday off in the last 4 months. That is not a way to sustain a ministry. And I got on him a little bit because we're good friends about it as well. So have specific times when you'll meet with people. You can't meet with people every day. That's okay. Number 3, prioritize your mornings. Prioritize your mornings, which again, this is what I just went back to. Now this is, regardless of what time you wake up in the morning, for most people, they are most energetic and focused, have the most willpower and determination in the morning. Now, I am actually naturally like a night person. Like if it wasn't for like kids and young kids, I would like, if I was like by myself, I would like work late into the evening. And while I like prefer to stay up late, even in the mornings, I am the most energized. You haven't made as many decisions, so you don't have decision fatigue, all these sort of things. You're the most productive in the first few hours of your workday. And so I'm not saying you should never take meetings in the first few hours of your workday, but I do think they should be rather rare or inconsistent. The only consistent meeting I take is on Tuesday mornings. I've got a discipleship group of guys that we meet 7 a.m. every Tuesday morning. That's it. Now, every once in a while, there's like something I have to go to, but like those are rare and far and few between. So I spend, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday mornings, I spend time working on sermons, writing things like prepping for this or recording this, writing my Best Minute newsletter. You can get it at dylandotson.com/best, which is about productivity and habit building. Things that require like strategic thinking, content. That's what I spend my mornings doing. And then when I get through that stuff, I kind of knock off a bunch of tasks before I start meeting people and doing different things in the afternoon. So again, I would recommend like things like sermon prep. If you write Bible study guides or whatever you might do, the things that take maybe some more cognitive tasks, you've got to do in the morning. You also need to do in the morning because these things are often harder. And so what we want to do is we kind of push them off later in the day. And so then we spend a lot of time thinking about them, somewhat dreading them because we know we're going to have to get to these things eventually. It's better to get them out of the way in the morning so you don't have to spend all day thinking about it. In fact, I was on Twitter/X recently. They actually finally just changed their URL from twitter.com to x.com. So now I guess I will start calling them X since they changed their URL. And it wasn't a Christian. I don't even know. I just showed up, and it was somebody was showing like their workday schedule, and they had a whole bunch of things going on, and then they had deep work from 4 to 5:30 p.m. Now, deep work, if you're not familiar, it was coined from Cal Newport in one of my all-time favorite books called Deep Work, and it's all about productivity and focus, and scheduling time to get like deep things done. And the irony I found from that schedule is like, oh, this person doesn't understand, like, if you're gonna do deep work and you're gonna do it at 4 o'clock after working from like 7:30 to 4, you're not gonna be nearly as efficient or effective as if you did that time slot in the morning. Me personally, like I can write better sermons more quickly in the morning than in the afternoon, which is why I prioritize my mornings because I'm focused. And so I just want to say like, this is part of prioritizing the morning. If you do like your focused work time in the afternoon, now I'm not saying this is a hard and fast rule, maybe you're the exception, and there are exceptions, sure. I just would recommend not being in the afternoon every single day because that is when you're, again, most mentally tired and drained. You're more likely to fall prey to distractions because you've already been doing a lot of stuff and you kind of exhausted your mental capacity in various ways. And so prioritize your mornings, do your deep work in the mornings. It'll set you up for success for the rest of the day, and you'll actually be way more efficient. Again, I've talked about sermon prep. On Monday mornings, I also write my Best Minute newsletter. And it is like, when I do it in the morning, it is probably 2x faster. And I don't think that's an exaggeration because I'm focused and I'm fresh. When I write our community group leader guides, because we do sermon-based Bible studies or community groups or a church, I write those in the morning. And it takes me, it's like probably half the time at least is what it would take me in the afternoon. So prioritize your mornings. It is a big deal. Not everything is an emergency. And if you want to sustain a ministry, which is the goal, not just last for 2 or 3 years, you've got to create a sustainable schedule. So that was that was number 3, prioritize your mornings. Number 4, Stick to the same sermon prep schedule every week. Now you know this, and again, if you watch this podcast, this is not a new thing for me. One of the biggest time wasters and stress builders for people who preach regularly is a lack of consistent sermon prep time. Their sermon prep is all over the place. They spend an hour here, a night here. I guess like that is not a formula for success. Again, you can scroll back. I've done various episodes. I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but if you scroll through the episodes, you can see like sermon prep schedule and how I do sermon prep. Not because mine's the best, but I think an episode like that is helpful because it talks about here's how I set mine up and how you should think through setting up something of your own. It's helpful for a couple reasons. One, it's actually just psychologically helpful that your brain knows, hey, every week at this time or at these times, I do sermon prep. It's helpful because, again, if you prioritize your mornings, here's when I do sermon prep, here's when it gets done, and it does not get moved. Again, if you're doing an hour here, hour there, it's really hard context switching with your brain. There's various studies on this, but even if you're sermon prepping, whatever, you're doing a task, and you take a 5-minute break on social media, it can take your brain anywhere from 18 to 25 minutes to refocus on the task at hand. My recommendation is to spend multiple hours at a time uninterrupted on sermon prep. But whatever it looks like, you need to put on your calendar. Maybe you can't swing the mornings. If you're bivocational, obviously there's some challenges there as well. But hey, here are the times on my calendar that sermon prep is already there. I don't take meetings. Again, there could be emergencies, but this is a job. And so here's when I do my job. Again, the hard thing about ministry is we feel like for example, when people want to meet, we often feel like we got to meet with them right away, even though they're not even asking for that. So you've got to get really good at distinguishing between when is an emergency and when is not an emergency. Because you have to sustain for the long haul. So whatever your sermon prep schedule is and however you do it, you need to do the same times every week. Again, I would scroll back a little. Mine's a little bit, I wouldn't say complicated, but as many of you know, if you've been listening for a while, I'm about 4 weeks ahead. And so how I do it just works out well for me. But I spend some time Monday, a large chunk of time on Wednesday, and some time Monday morning, large chunk of time on Wednesday, and then times Thursday morning on my sermon prep, amongst a few other miscellaneous things. But those are my times, and I never miss them, ever. That's when I do it. And it's also helpful too, when you have it in your calendar, excuse me, you can also move things around when necessary. So it's hey, I've got 2 or 3 hours in sermon prep on a Tuesday morning, but I have this thing on Tuesday morning I have to do. Well, because you already have it in your calendar, you can simply move it around. Again, but you want to make that an exception. So stick to the same sermon prep schedule every week. I also want to say this, you do not have to finish your sermon on Saturday night at 9 o'clock at night. You don't have to. You can finish your sermon Thursday morning. That's allowed, or Friday morning, or whatever. It's not spiritual to wait until 30 minutes before you have to give it. You can set, I set deadlines for yourself that are movable if you need to, but instead of Sunday morning being the deadline, or Saturday night, here's the deadline, here's when it's going to be done, and stick to that. That will help you. If you preach regularly, your probably biggest point of contention is your lack of sermon prep scheduling. If you feel a little bit overwhelmed and burnt out, if you change this, it'll make a big difference. That was number 4. Number 5. Belong to a tribe. Now, this could be a network, a denomination, whatever, but you should not be doing ministry alone. You've got to have churches and other people supporting you and helping you. I don't think it's that different than people in your church. You and I, if you're followers of Jesus, if we're ministry leaders, if you're a pastor, you believe in the local church that people should not be following Jesus alone. Well, I don't think ministry leaders should be doing this alone as well. And so whether, again, it's a denomination you're a part of, a network you're a part of, you should have relationships with other ministry leaders, other pastors outside of your church, where you can be honest about struggles, that you can get feedback, that you can get encouragement. Now, I want to say this. Our love of the use of busy keeps us from doing these things. And so if you are part of a tribe, denomination, whatever, can I just encourage you to prioritize gathering with those people? Whether it's a monthly lunch or an annual conference or gathering or a regional event. Many times, in ministry, we want other ministry friends, and you might know people who seem to have some solid ministry friends, and you're man, I wish I had that. Well, a big reason why they have that is because they prioritize getting together with other pastors. They prioritize, again, their denominational conference or their network conference or their network gathering or whatever it is, monthly gatherings. They prioritize it. They don't let their busyness get in the way. There's always something to be that's going on. It's always going to be easier to skip it than go to it. But if you want friends, you have to commit to these things. So put them on your calendar and show up every single time that you can. If you want friends in ministry, you have to have a tribe. And of course, if you want to sustain a ministry, you've got to have outlets outside of just your church or people in your church, because you can't, again, a lot of things you can't talk about with people in your church. It's helpful to be around people who understand what you're going through, can give you advice and encouragement, can pray with you. And if you have that over the years, can make a really big difference in your life. And so again, you want to belong to a tribe, and not just like in name only, hey, we're part of this denomination or this network or this thing, but actually go to it and build relationships. Again, many people that I've experienced who are experiencing a lot of burnout, it's not the only reason, or a lot of unhealthy ministry, but a lot of times it's because they don't have friends and they don't have people in ministry because they haven't prioritized it. So put it on the calendar and prioritize it. And last but not least, number 6, the 6th way to sustain yourself in ministry and avoid cynicism is this. This is more maybe an encouragement than a thing, but always remember the privilege it is to be a pastor. Always remember the privilege it is to be a pastor. When I'm recording this, it was last week, about a week ago as I'm recording this, there was like the, I guess, somewhat viral tweet about this guy, and he was talking about ministry, and it was basically negative. He's like, you're not gonna be, he's like Albert Mohler, John Piper, and somebody else. He's like, or Billy Graham. He's like, you're not that, which is true. And he was talking about how you're gonna get some small church, and they're not gonna pay you enough, and it's gonna be hard on your kids, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, bro, first of all, yeah, you're not, like the only thing I wanted to agree with, like, yeah, you're not going to be all these big wig people that you've heard of. I also wanted to say, like, 2 of the 3 people he mentioned in his list were not even pastors. So I'm like, bro, that's not even an effect. Like Billy Graham, great guy, not a pastor. Albert Mohler is not a pastor. So anyway, you're not going to be some big name guy. But it was like so negative. And I'm like, man, like this is not helpful. Well, if you listen to this episode of this podcast for any length of time, like one of my big pet peeves is like going to pastor gatherings or whatever, and everyone talking about how hard it is. And it's like, bro, because here's what happens, man. You begin to believe if ministry is not hard, you're doing it wrong. Or ministry has to be miserable. It does not have to be miserable. Yes, it is hard, but can I just say, man, what a joy it is to meet with people, sometimes like people you barely know. But simply because you're a pastor, man, they're telling you like deep, dark, hard things they're going through, and they're trusting you with that. You get to be part of like weddings and like meet people in the hospital, like babies. Like you get to be part of the highest highs and the lowest lows of people's lives. And what a privilege. Like what a privilege that you and I get to like study God's word as a job. Like not just on our own, and like learn some things. And so I just, man, being a privilege or being a pastor is a joy. Being in ministry is a privilege. And we need to remember that. Not to say we cannot have spaces where we can be honest that it is hard. But I want to say, man, a lot of people have hard jobs. And I think sometimes in ministry world, we can say like only ministry is hard. And especially if we like complain about it from the pulpit, which is like a big, I would say big no-no, don't do that. It kind of downplays everyone else's job as if they don't have hard things. Yes, there are some hard things in ministry. And yes, there are some uniquely hard things about ministry. But there are also uniquely hard things about everybody's job. And so we just need to recognize that. But man, just remember, it is a privilege. It is a joy. It is hard. Yes, it is weighty. But man, what an opportunity that we have. What a privilege that we have, that we get to love people, study God's word, and be a part of like really important, pivotal moments in people's lives. And so just, man, my encouragement, always remember the privilege it is to be a pastor and ministry leader, that Jesus allows us to walk alongside his people. Here's my observation for this episode. This is specifically in the context of church planters, but really, as you'll see, it's also helpful for all pastors and ministry leaders. When somebody asks you something, or when you have an ask for fundraising, for example, be specific. Be specific. 2 weeks ago, I was at a gathering of a bunch of pastors, and there was this breakout. They had breakout sessions for church planters, and they were just like interviewing some of the church planters, and they were asking them, what's going on. And then at least in the session there was 4 church planters, and at the end they said, man, give us a big ask. Only one of the 4 church planters that got that opportunity, and they're in front of all these other pastors who are leading churches, who want to plant churches and fund churches. Only one of the 4 gave a specific dollar amount that they were trying to raise. One of the 4. One guy was like, I'm not quite sure, like, we're moving soon, and so we could, like, they just, like, it was a whole bunch of, I'm not trying to be negative, but it was a whole bunch of, like, it was unhelpful. Like, if you don't give me a specific ask, I cannot tell you yes or no. So, man, if you're a church planter, I'm gonna just say this, if you're raising money, here's how much money we're raising, here's how much I'm asking for you, and here's the period of time I'd like to see that come in. If you can't give a specific ask, People cannot say yes to it, so we should not be discouraged. Now, of course, the translation is for those of us that aren't church planners or currently like leading churches or current pastors, this goes for anything. Man, if you want more volunteers, you can't just say, listen, we'd like some more volunteers. Man, you need, like, my encouragement, a specific number amount. We need 10 more people serving in this ministry, and we'd like to have 10 more people sign over the next 2 weeks. Here's what we're gonna do. Can you do this? If you're trying to raise money for anything, if you're not a church planner, maybe you're already in an existing church, you're moving to a new building, right? That's like probably typically like a really easy one to see because you need this much money so people can actually respond to it. But if there's any need in your church, maybe you're looking to hire staff or you need to volunteer for a specific position, like you have to ask for that specific thing. Again, in this example, this pastor said, hey, I'm looking to raise $150,000 over the next 3 years. Here's how much we have raised so far. Here's where we're going. When somebody says that, what it communicates to me is like, A, they've thought about this and they have a plan for the money. Now, they might not exactly know how they're going to spend. It might be like a general amount, but there's a confidence and there's I can say yes or no to this. When I meet with church planners, I met with one as I'm recording this yesterday, and then I'm going to meet with another one later this afternoon. When I tell them like New City is interested in supporting them, I often have to tell them, now I need you to give me a specific ask, because they're like, yeah, we'll take your money. That doesn't mean anything for me. Also, a little side back of information. We've been around 7 years, and we've done some like one-off gifts, but at this point, like we like to at least for us, significantly invest in church plants. So we invested in 5 church plants. We're going to be doing 2 more later this year, and there has been multiple times where I had to tell guys ask for more money. Because they didn't ask enough. People can say no. People will rarely, if ever, give more than what you ask, even if they're capable. So there was a time a couple years ago where somebody asked for a certain amount of money, and I told him to ask for more, and he asked for more, and we gave him what he asked for. And we would have given him more if he had asked for more. There was another guy, another time, about another church planner who asked for a specific amount of money, and one of my elders was like, nope, that's what we're going to give him. If he wanted more, he should have asked for more. And I was like, well, fair, but he's still learning. But that's what we did. And so can I just say, you will not get more than you ask for. You very rarely will do that. So have a specific amount, ask for more than you might think they'll say yes to, and they'll probably give you more than they were thinking of if you do so. So whether it's finances, volunteers, a service project, whatever, if you are a general, expect a non-committal general response. If you are specific, people can actually say yes or no to what you're asking. Here is this episode's personal growth tip. This is the best way to optimize anything. Here's the best way to optimize anything that you want to do. You gotta understand this, that you can't optimize what you don't start. You cannot optimize what you don't start. It is much easier to start small and imperfectly than to have a perfect start. It's actually, at the end of the day, it's the starting that's actually the hard part. You and I can spend so much time trying to research and figure out everything up front that you never actually start. The best way to learn is to do, not just watch YouTube and read a book. So for example, if you want to get in shape, start with an imperfect workout plan. You're not going to have the perfect form or know what to do anyway unless you start and adjust. If you want to get in shape, start with an imperfect workout plan. If you want to learn pottery, start with an online video and subpar but accessible supplies. If you want to bake the perfect cake, you have to bake a bunch of imperfectly baked cakes to learn what not to do. You can't just read about it, you have to do it. Once you start, you'll end up learning a lot. You'll realize that you didn't need to have it all figured out to begin with anyway, and you'll even begin to figure out things that you didn't even know made a difference before you started. Knowing what not to do in some ways is even better than knowing what to do, and you can only know that by starting. You can only learn things that you've tried, and when you've seen they haven't worked, you can improve. The best plan is the one you put into action, not the one you think about. Today's ministry question comes from Richie in the Practical Church Facebook group. He posted this. He said, we are having amazing Sunday morning service growth, and I think we have a good follow-up strategy on getting people to return. We are very weak and start losing steam getting people to join our First Steps class. It's like a bottleneck. And then he goes on to talk about how it's a bottleneck there, and this is how many people get plugged into their ministry team. So a lot of their ministry teams, it's their First Step class. Now, things are going well, they're losing steam. There's a lot of things you could say. Here's my just like general overall thoughts on this. It's great that you know where your bottleneck is. So the question is, if what do you call it? Your First Steps class is your first thing you're doing. Are you, going back to observation, are you being specific in your ask for it? Do you do it regularly, or do you just wait for enough people to sign up? My encouragement, maybe depending on the size of your church, but I think this is a healthy place to start, especially if you're not large, is maybe having go ahead and putting on your calendar for once a quarter or maybe every other month, and just it's on the calendar, and so that you can announce it from stage in your sermon so that people can be signing up for it. My guess is people don't always know what's going on, or you're waiting for people to express interest in it, and so they don't sign up. We've seen this a lot of times. We call it Discover New City, or when we do baptism Sundays or whatever. When you put something on the calendar and just talk about it more, people who were on the fence about it or didn't even know it exists will sign up for it. So I would be, my first thought without knowing all the what's going on there is to be very clear about when your first step takes place, and then also make it accessible. Like if you have one service on a Sunday morning, maybe right after the service on a Sunday morning is a great spot. Or do you offer childcare and food? I think for most churches, you probably have some families. I would pay for that. If it's hey, come back on a Sunday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and we're going to do a class, that just sounds not great. Also, how you communicate it. For us at New City, we tell people, if you've never been to Discover, no matter how long you've been here, you should go. One of our things at New City is that we don't want you giving, serving, and in a group for a year or two, and then you find out something that we teach or believe and be well, no one ever told me. And so it's not a fear tactic for us, but it's hey, before you jump all in and commit everything to this church, you got to make sure that this is the church that you're comfortable with and that you're along the same pages on. So I would make sure your how you explain it is crisp and clear. I probably wouldn't leave it to whoever does your announcements unless you're good about training them. Hey, say it this way. It might be helpful if you're a pastor to mention it in your sermon, at the beginning of your sermon, here's what it is, here's what's coming up, and here's why you need to sign up. But put it on the calendar regularly, talk about it regularly, and be excited about it. I think food and childcare is a must if you want people to show up, so it doesn't feel like an extra thing they have to do. So thanks so much for again joining me on the Practical Church podcast today. As always, we are on YouTube, Practical Church, or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe. If you want more from me, you can go to DylanDotson.com/best for the Best Minute newsletter. But if you want more from Practical Church, missionsupport.com/practical. You can sign up for the Practical Church newsletter and get more free resources. And of course, if you need help to save time and energy doing the things you don't want to do, be sure to check out missionsupport.com. Check out their services. Schedule a time with a guide so that you can love being a pastor. Again, we'll be with you in 2 weeks on the Practical Church podcast.